All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started here. Let me start by saying welcome everyone to Impact Dashboard Confidential. My name is Paul Shurin, and I'm an economist and partner with Impact Data Source. Thank you for joining us today for the final session of our 5-part webinar series where we're hearing from some of our Impact Dashboard users. Today, as I clicked forward to our schedule here, today we have with us Jason Greiner from the Wylie EDC in Wylie, Texas. Wylie is located in the DFW Metroplex, somewhat close to Plano and Garland and Rockwall, so kind of right there in the middle of it all, so to speak. He's been using Impact Dashboard for about a year, and we're going to hear in just a little bit how he uses the model in his role at the Wylie EDC. As you see, we had a number of other sessions over the last few weeks. We've got videos of those posted, so there'll be a video of this as well made available, so you can get all the information on these. Let me just take a minute here to give some background and set the stage a little bit and explain what Impact Dashboard is. But as I mentioned, my name is Paul Shurin. I'm an economist with Impact Data Source. Many of you may know my partner, Jerry Walker. He started the company in 1993. So we have a little over 20 years, almost up on 25 years of experience evaluating economic development projects. And so we're almost exclusively focused on economic development impact analysis, and we really work kind of two different ways. One is we license computer models or software so clients can do their own studies, and that's what Jason does in Wylie. He uses Impact Dashboard. But we also prepare impact studies on an as-needed basis, so kind of on a one-by-one, as-you-go kind of thing, as opposed to the software, which is an annual subscription. We also put out a couple different podcasts. One is Economic Development Secrets, and that's where my colleague Nicole D'Souza interviews economic developers from all over the country. And talks about career and a number of different things, projects that they have in their community and what's happening in their part of the country. And then 123 CECD, and that podcast and that website is a little bit more focused on the certification process and kind of that whole world for CECD. Before I turn things over, let me just kind of explain a little bit to give a little bit more background on exactly what Impact Dashboard is. So Impact Dashboard is an online software that we set up and that we customize for clients so that clients can run an impact analysis that's relevant for economic development. And so by that, we're going to include in Impact Dashboard in the results that come out of that some economic impacts. So when you think about, well, what are the spin-off jobs that might come from this economic development project, we'll have that in there. But then we also tie that to the tax revenues. So if you want to understand what the city or the county or the school district is going to receive in terms of new tax revenues, maybe some additional costs, we'll ferret all that out as well. And then finally, kind of that third part of an economic impact analysis that we see for economic developers is really the incentive analysis. And so being able to calculate an ROI on incentives relative to what the community is getting out of the project in terms of those revenues. And so that's pretty much a rough overview of what Impact Dashboard does. And the last few things, as I mentioned, we're going to be recording this, and so we'll make the video available if you're interested in seeing that. If you have any questions, feel free to type those in. We have a little question section in the panel. Those will come to me, and then we can address those as we go or toward the end, maybe. So feel free at any point to jump in and ask any questions there. So let me, with all that, let me turn it over to Jason with his presentation here. We're going to switch screens.
Thank you, Paul. As we switch this over here. I don't see where I can switch it over yet.
Let me try it again. Well, let me try to hand it off again here. Maybe it popped up now.
I still don't have control. I can kind of get started as we work through this, if you like.
Yeah, go ahead. Let me see. I'll kind of take things back here and see if I can hand it back to you again. Maybe it'll pop up this time.
Okay. So anyways, my name is Jason Greiner. I'm the assistant director here at the Wylie EDC here in Wylie, Texas. I've worked for the Economic Development Corporation and also the city of Wylie. So we're about 26 miles northeast of downtown Dallas, or about 15 minutes east of downtown Plano. We're located in 3 different counties. We're relatively small, I guess, when you can compare us to the Frisco, McKinneys, Allens, Planos, and Richardsons of the world. But we primarily do most of our work in Collin County, and then of course to our southwest we do have some property in Dallas County, which then in that area you've got the rest of Richardson, and of course Dallas and Garland, and then some property over in Rockwall County. So just to the southeast of us you've got Rockwall, Texas. We have a population of right around 50,000 now, but as you can imagine, that hasn't always been the case. When our current executive director first got here, who's Sam Satterwhite, by the way, but when he first got here 22 years ago, we were a community of about 10 to 12,000 population. So he has seen our community pretty much go through the entire build out phase. This community, some communities will take 100 years to go through that process. Really, in about 30 years, our community's really fast forwarded through that entire build out, from chasing the industrial and manufacturing companies and really doing recruitment, all the way through trying to bring in workforce housing, and you saw an early housing boom in our market and in Collin County in the early 2000s, and then of course following the rooftops, you've got commercial development and retail once your traffic counts and population densities get up. So in our model, if I can switch over here in just a second, our model will, a lot of our projects are smaller in nature just due to the fact we do a lot of revitalization and redevelopment, and that helps spur a lot of the commercial development in our market. Paul, did you get that to pop up to where I can?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. So it's kind of waiting for you to show the screen. Is there a sharing section that you see in the go to webinar panel?
I saw it earlier and I don't see it now.
It might be minimized at the top, at the very top of that.
I do apologize.
Let me.
It worked fine when we go through that in the dry run just a second ago.
Yeah. Is there can you see on your other, maybe it's behind, there should be a window that pops up on your screen, is behind something maybe on one of your other screens even?
Let me look and see. I'll minimize everything. Sorry for the technical problems here. I don't have anything popping up. I've got just this go-to meeting.
I'm going to change this back to me, and then I'll try it one more time here to hand it back. And maybe something will pop up because it just says waiting for your screen. Were you going to show your actual model? If
yes,
that's the case,
I was.
Let me do that. I can pull it up here. I don't want to show too much sensitive information. So if you want to tell me what project, is there a particular one we can jump into? You
can just open it up, and I've already kind of changed some of the project names in it, and I've already changed some of the parameters in there. If you'll just open it up and then scroll down to I guess sure. It's 1, 2, 3 in this scenario.
Okay. Sure.
Yep. So on this screen, and I apologize again for the technical difficulties. I don't know what's happening on my end here, but this project, if you click on general info, 2 years ago, just a little over 2 years ago, they hired me to come over. I'm the assistant director here. I came in from East Texas. I worked in Longview for 3 years, and this screen right here really demonstrates the difference between the organizations. I only mentioned that I worked out there to kind of compare and contrast the difference between some of the different communities, and really from what I've seen working for one community versus another. These are my selections. Really, this is the only selection I have: City of Wylie, Collin County, Wylie ISD, pretty much all of our projects are in this parameter. So I can change the NAICS code and I can get really creative with, scenario names and descriptions. But, in East Texas, we did projects inside city limits. Out in the ETJ, we had a business park that was in 2 different counties. We had 4 different school districts all in one community. So really for Wylie, this is it. So if you'll click back over onto workers relocating. So really the difference between our model and some of the others, I noticed real quickly working with Paul, one of the first things that brought me over to Impact Data Source was because our model that we were using internally was an Excel sheet, and really what we tried to calculate was appraised value times property tax rate times 10 years, and we look at a multiple of 3 to 5 years for different incentives to look at payback. In Longview, we used an impact analysis, economic impact analysis that I believe was actually built by Impact Data Source many, many years ago. In Longview, this number for workers relocating, if we got 100 employees relocating from California, 95% of them would land in Longview. Here in our market, you see it's so much lower because we're a suburb of so many larger communities, and a lot of our workforce lives outside this area. So for salaries, of course, we use TWC reports as much as possible, Texas Workforce Commission verified reports, third-party verified. Instead of getting information directly from the projects, I try and input all this information. Capital investment on the next line, we don't submit and have our prospects actually supply the information. We use more of like a BRE style questionnaire, not like 100 questions where you send over to somebody and ask them to fill out the information. We'll do it more as a conversational style, and I'll ask this information as we go through it. As you'll see in a second, we go through so many different iterations of projects and go through so many different options. This allows me to not just take their capital investment at what they're projecting for cost, but also understanding our market. I'll go back and put in appraised values into each one of these numbers. So if you'll jump out of this and go back over to my projects and scroll down to 10,000 square feet there, that's a perfect example. You don't have to click on either of those. The Regency and Springwell, so this is a 10,000 square foot building. They give me numbers. They think it's going to be about $1 million. They put in a contingency. It's going to be 1.2 million. It's less than 5 jobs. I can take that and put that in as the initial iteration for the project, but I also go back and look at it, understanding the type of building construction in our market. I know that the appraisal district will hit $80 a square foot for most certainly. I guess I'd say that I know that it'll hit $80 a square foot, and so that gives us a more conservative number. If you scroll down, what led us to Paul in the very beginning, this popcorn, the very last one, if you'll click on that and then not select any of those others. So when we first got in touch with Paul, I had a local manufacturer that was looking at competing with corporate and some of their other locations and trying to secure some investment in our community. And Paul and I talked about it, and he ran a one-off report for us for Project Hitch. Larger manufacturer. Over the years, they've piecemealed their facility together. They're kind of landlocked, so it was very important from a business retention standpoint to really demonstrate to our board, hey, give me a full-blown economic analysis that shows not only the full-blown project, but what if this was a total loss? What would our community actually lose? You think, man, we're losing a lot of jobs, but what else are you losing? And working with Paul, we were able to demonstrate like this is a lot larger project than we thought. This is an example of another project that was like that. They were competing with another location, and we looked at it as, hey, what if we lose the entire project? We lose the 25 existing jobs. You have a loss. If you click on that entire project at the very second to last, yeah, that one right there.
You want me to click on it?
Yeah, if you will. And then as you click on capital investment, so what you actually see in this model is, it wasn't a sizable project. It wasn't real big, but $1 million expansion here locally, or they could do it somewhere else. 500,000 square foot or $500,000 in FF&E locally, and we got some extra jobs out of the deal. 10-year net benefit to the city, $239,000. So for us, a lot of these projects, I mean, it just demonstrates, the entire process, the value that it actually shows that each one of these companies bring to the table with our community, and it allowed us to demonstrate that to our board of directors. If you'll go back out to its very top, I believe, defense contract. Yeah, and then you see here, this is, I mean, like the number of of scenarios that I run. I mean, this was a redevelopment project. We bought a piece of property. They were leasing space in it. What happens if we buy it and they don't renew the lease? We're going to tear these buildings down. I mean, what if they leave the community? You know, and then it actually went into further discussion where there was actually potential expansion opportunity locally. And so if you click on the very last one there, no relocation. So I put more information in the scenario name. That way I can see it from that home screen, and that way it's easy for me to find. If you'll click capital investment again. So in this screen, it's an 11,200 square foot facility. I put $80 a square foot value for the building and personal improvements, and the land. This wasn't new land that was annexed into the community, so we look at an incremental increase. I know that this piece of property was about $1.83 a square foot appraised value, and we know that as soon as you put a building on it, it jumps up to $5 a square foot. Take 5 minus $1.83, do the math, you get $180,000 that you can put in the land screen here, and then we're able to calculate, look what this company did. So we took them from older dilapidated building where they were leasing space, spin them out into the business park, and you get this investment in our business park. And we know 11,200 square foot building isn't big to a lot of communities, but in a landlocked community that's surrounded by other communities and sandwiched between two lakes, this is a win. We'll take these all day long on smaller pieces of property. So if you'll jump down to, back up to the home screen, and then down to, I think it's hotel. So this is a perfect example. If you'll click on that first one, this is La Quinta. So who do we share this information with? You know, once I convinced our board of directors, like, hey, this impact analysis, this is pretty cool, you know, and maybe we should look at this and invest in this tool, and you guys can use this and run economic impact analysis on different projects. It was inevitable that the question came up like, hey, will you go back and look at some of these other projects? Will you go back and look at some of these? If you'll click on capital investment here, I called Paul and I said, Paul, man, can you please help me with this? You know, I've got a crazy question. We're talking about going back and looking at investment for a hotel. And here we go. Appraisal district just released some information. Brand new La Quinta in our market, $5.2 million valuation on the building, $450,000 in land. And if you scroll down to building permits and fees, I think I discussed this with Paul on how to capture this. They had $120,000 in initial fees, and then the hotel occupancy tax projected generation here in money back to the city is $100,000 a year. So I plugged in $100,000 for 10 years. And 10-year net benefit to the city of Wylie, $1.6 million. So it's easy to go back and even look at projects historically and really demonstrate to the board, like, hey, you know, this was a home run. So if you go back to my projects one more time, and the mixed-use project there. This is, on this home screen right here, I do this on purpose, and it's so I can do a screenshot of this page, and I can print it off, and I can show this to my board, or I can show this to our executive director and say, look, these are the numbers I'm crunching. I've got 300,000 square foot for an apartment complex. I've got a restaurant. I've got a strip center. I've got all these different developments. I was on a webinar with Paul and I believe the retail coach with Aaron Farmer, and Paul was going through some impact analysis with Chick-fil-A, which I thought was perfect timing because we had a Chick-fil-A project at that exact time. So I screenshot all those and saved them. But when he went through another project where I believe it was a Walmart and some restaurants out front, this is where this idea really came from. So we're not really in the business of doing incentive deals for apartments, of course, but when we look at qualified infrastructure for the restaurants and for 18,000 square foot of office buildings from a development standpoint, this definitely caught our eye. If you'll click on that second to last one down there, apartments 300,000. So this project, just to demonstrate to city council or our, you know, of course, our elected officials or our city manager, you'll click on capital investment down there. Very ultra conservative. This is based on information in our market, but 300,000 square foot of apartments at $100 a square foot, $30 million. You take that $30 million and you got about $1 million in building permits and fees. That's $5.2 million over 10 years to the city of Wylie. So when you look at different deals and when you look at structuring incentives or 380 agreements, or as you go through the process and trying to convince the community, hey, I think this investment's potentially worth it. I mean, like this is priceless when you can actually sit down and show the numbers. So I apologize for the technical difficulty. I think I've covered a lot of our topics, and I'd be more than happy to answer anybody's questions, but I wanted to take one last second and just urge everyone, if you don't use a model like this, please do so, because in economic development, there's so many stories out there that are negative towards incentives, and the more that we can do to show that we're being diligent with taxpayer dollars, I think it helps every community around us. So thank you again for the time, and I'll turn it back over to you, Paul.
Great. Thanks, Jason. That was good. I think if there's any questions, feel free for anyone, feel free to type those in. But I do have a question for you, Jason. I guess you mentioned incentives on this, and so you mentioned a couple different things. It sounds like for most of these you are considering. Are you often doing 380 agreements, or what kinds of things do you have in your bag of tricks there that you maybe work between the EDC and the city?
Yeah, so I work, technically speaking, I guess I'm a City of Wylie employee, but I work for the Economic Development Corporation. So, of course, we answer to both. So I've got a board of directors and an executive director here, and then we've got of course, city council and city manager of the city. So we work together, and there's a lot of communities and economic development groups across the country, from the consulting side prior to going to EDC or EDO world. I saw that there were some EDOs in some communities that worked separate, and some of them worked really well together. You've got joint development authorities in other states, and then in some areas you've got multiple districts where they really act independently. And in Wylie, you've kind of got that mixture of the city and the EDC work hand in hand. So for each of these projects, in our board meetings, we've got the city manager and the mayor at every single one of our board meetings, and they listen to our projects and understand exactly what we're working on. For a lot of our stuff, sandwiched between two lakes, we have a lot of floodplain in our area. So a lot of our money that we use from economic development standpoint usually goes towards infrastructure and helping with site development. There's nothing easy that's left inside city limits. All the easy stuff is already taken. So a lot of our money goes towards infrastructure in different projects. This mixed-use project was actually a former landfill. And so when you think of the overwhelming amount of money that would go into even just getting that dirt back to where you could use it, we do a lot of environmental projects. We do a lot of redevelopment in our market. So there's generally some sort of partnership. There are 380 agreements that are available through the city. We've done sales tax reimbursement programs through larger retail developments back in the late, 2008, 2009. I think we got one of the last targets in this market, one of the last expansions they did right before the retail downturn, right before the economy tanked. They ended up building that facility, and it worked out for us, of course, but they did a sales tax reimbursement program with them. Kroger Center came in, and we did a infrastructure deal with them where we really took a road and actually connected it to Saxe and helped with infrastructure to drive some of the retail. So most of our incentive money's in infrastructure, cash grants, land grants, and then infrastructure offsetting that or offsetting fees to the city.
Yeah, makes sense. Good stuff that stays in the ground, stays there in
absolutely.
In Wylie. So we do have a question here, and it's asking with a distinction between Type A and Type B projects. So do you offer higher incentives to Type A projects, so like the primary employers, or Type B projects with the retail, restaurant, et cetera? Does it or does it depend on the returns and the cost benefit regardless type of project? How do you make those distinctions on incentives there?
Well, I think it's always on a case-by-case basis. Our board looks at a number of different projects. Of course, for the primary employers, that's the industry I came from, larger industry, primary employers, lots of jobs, capital investment. In our market, with a lot of the revitalization and redevelopment, I don't know that there's really a difference between the two in the way that they look at them. I think they have drastically different outputs. And when you look at primary employers, there's a huge emphasis in our market trying to retain what we have. We have some larger manufacturers in our area. And that if you lose a building that has been piecemeal together over years and it's grown and it's landlocked, if you lose that manufacturer and that equipment that's inside that facility, I guarantee you don't get that same value back in that property. And that's what Paul and I initially talked about with Project Hitch, one of the first projects we ever worked on, because my fear with an intermodal right up the road, that was going to be a distribution facility. I mean, we all know what the difference is between a pallet company that's distributing product there versus an automotive manufacturer, a parts manufacturer. So, I mean, like drastically different impact in our local economy. So I think that the primary employers would have to have a larger consideration. When we look at incentives, and I had asked this question on I think the first webinar that you guys put together, was just trying to ask other communities where they're at in their payback periods. When you're sitting here staring at the screen for the mixed use project, that first line says 0.5-year payback at $725,000. That a lot of our projects will look at less than a half-year payback if it's infrastructure related, or maybe 1-year payback. If it's a primary employer, of course, our incentives are usually in the probably 2 to 4 year range as far as payback time frame. And I've asked other communities in our immediate vicinity, and they'll go up to 7-year payback on primary employers, and even further than that, if the jobs are there and if the capital investment's there.
Yeah, that seems to make sense with a shorter payback on infrastructure type things. And then, I've seen the same type of thing where, you can go out 7 or 7+ years on other big primary employer projects. And it sounds like, that's, if you're able to do, you mentioned maybe somewhere between 2 and 4 years, that's definitely a pretty good deal, I think, in the way that everything comes together. So
if you click on that defense contractor there at the top, and then look at the bottom line there, it's 3.4 years. I mean, they're all different, but I mean, like anywhere between 2 to 4 years, I think is kind of the sweet spot for our board. They feel comfortable at that level. And the other thing is there's a learning curve with this. When you're just looking at property tax reimbursement, and you see INS in mind, so that they'd always looked at the property taxes that were generated locally, and then the INS rate that's paid directly back to the school district, because that money comes right back into our economy, or right back into our community. The money, we'll run through this in a couple different scenarios where it doesn't have the INS rate and it does have the INS rate. We kind of split out, the city's 10-year return on investment. We don't really get into the school district and the county. The county, Collin County, has actually done away with tax abatement, so they've taken one of those tools away from us. So it's put more of an emphasis on the local economies to really be able to compete. And in Collin County, when you're swimming with big fish like Frisco and Plano, and you see these corporate relocations and expansions locally, it puts even more emphasis on us to close the deal when we get an opportunity. And fortunately, we still have some land to work with, and when we do have an intermodal, eventually we'll be able to structure some deals and bring in some investment. But I mean, I had a screen I was actually going to show, and it was all the negative side of incentives and the cylinder deals and everything else. I mean, when our community comes and says, well, why are you giving them $400,000, or why are you giving them $500,000 in incentives, I think it's very important for everybody to quickly and concisely be able to articulate exactly why that makes sense. Because if we can't, as a group in economic development, if we can't answer that question, it causes even more doubt. And I think that these impact analysis really try and help dispel those rumors and misconceptions in the market. And you can attach this straight to your performance agreements, and this goes right in the folder with all of our projects.
Very, very cool. That's a neat. That's interesting that you include it in that way on the agreements. But I think it's part of your decision-making process. So I think it's a good idea there. So doesn't look like we have any other questions. So let's see. Oh, so just as I say it, let me. The question here is: are there any reports from Impact Dashboard that you share with the general public?
At this time, no, but I think the time is coming where, if you're trying to get community buy-in and support, so the intermodal in our market is an interesting thing. I came into Wylie and I thought, awesome, intermodal, it's going to be easy. We're going to recruit industry. Well, the community doesn't really care for it because of the truck traffic it generates, and we're a suburb of some of these larger communities, but a lot of people moved out here to get away from traffic. Wylie was a smaller community. So when it comes to buy-in and support, eventually, I think these documents might have a serious role, running their course in the newspaper and actually released in public, because what it actually shows is the if you want to reduce tax rates locally, tax rates are somewhat higher in our community because of all the infrastructure that we had to put in all at one time with the roads. So if you want to continue to reduce the tax rates, you've got to add either more commercial or industrial in the area. And in order to do that, bringing in some large tax generators, with some larger manufacturing or, larger distribution centers, that just helps carry some of the burden. And I think that's an education process we all have to go through. But I think for sure that it helps, again, just kind of dispel rumors and helps put more emphasis on a return on investment to the communities instead of just corporate welfare or interfering with the free market economy. So, there's a large percentage of people on the political spectrum that don't like incentives in the first place. So anything we can do to share that information and potentially shed some positive light on it, I think that it would be important for us to share.
Great. Well, I think with that we can wrap it up here. But thank you so much, Jason, for joining us today and kind of presenting and kind of rolling with things here as we had some trouble with the screens. But again, really appreciate you, and I appreciate everyone for joining us today. And thanks so much, everyone.
No problem. Thanks. Take care.